Welcome, everybody. We know that people are joining. So just for the first few minutes, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Nikki Pitchford. I'm Head of Quality Assurance at the International Centre for EdTech Impact, and I'm delighted to be hosting this webinar today with OneBillion and Dr. Aida Layachi. We are recording this video and it will be accessible after the session if you'd like to share it with colleagues. But if you would like to ask a question and don't want to be seen on screen, then please make sure your camera is turned off. So this is the first of a series of webinars over the next coming months that's looking at EdTech leadership in action. So over the forthcoming months, we're going to spotlight transformative leadership in EdTech by sharing proven strategies, failures, and forward-thinking innovations that are shaping educational technology globally. Our first webinar today is with OneBillion, and we're looking at how they have been embedding learning sciences and neurodiversity research to refine their award-winning software, OneCourse, to enhance its accessibility to ensure it's equitable for all learners, regardless of their learning profile, ability, or background. And in particular, we're spotlighting OneBillion's pioneering work with the Lego Foundation to create EdTech that supports neurodiverse learners. So designed for children with varied cognitive and learning needs, OneBillion's tablet-based software delivers individualized literacy and numeracy learning content that's both accessible and evidence-based. And OneBillion are currently redefining their design thinking and content through a neurodiversity lens so their software can benefit all learners. This inclusive design offers a transformative model of equitable education in low resource settings. And we're very, very honoured to be joined by members of OneBillion's team. Here today, we have Andrew Ashe, who is the co-founder and CEO of OneBillion. We have Nat Dinham, who is the director of OneBillion, and Sam Weeks, who is the content author. And we are also going to learn from Dr. Aida Layachi of research conducted with OneBillion and looking at how that research has led to a change in design thinking and content development. So we're going to start, first of all, with a question to Andrew. And we're focusing here very much on leadership. So Andrew, from a leadership perspective, what drives OneBillion's strategic approach to EdTech? And how do you ensure that your vision translates to real impact for the children you serve?
Yes, well, good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here. As most of you will know, we are an EdTech publisher, and we've now been working for 20 years on putting the child at the center of everything we do. How does this affect us as a publisher by putting the child at the center? First of all, we have an understanding that we haven't plateaued. We can and we are aiming higher in terms of what we do for the child. We take the child where they are, but not where we wish they were. So if a child arrives at school and they haven't got the right language skills, they perhaps have missed out on school readiness skills, we take them where they are and want to provide them with material for them. The next point I want to make is we value research enormously. It has changed what we do, and we welcome and value this and see the role of research to help us improve being invaluable. There are some things we're strategically cautious of. We're cautious about AI. We see the AI attempts to make decisions on what the child should experience being decided by AI. We're cautious of this. It's untested. We respect the child's digital rights, and this means we respect local legislation and cultures. We believe in the child. We believe in their need to learn through play. We work with government partners and research. We listen. We strategically see this as invaluable. We find ways to listen to the quiet voice of the child. Often the child is left out of the discussion. We do everything we can to hear that voice. Strategically, we as an organization make holistic experiences that are child-centered. And this contrasts with the way some EdTech is now going. We've all seen what's happened with social media, the sort of high intensity dopamine hits that children get. And it was, we were all fed the lie, really, that this was going to benefit us all. And we now know that it can cause harm to children. We respect the child's need for play and for limited screen time. So those are some of the strategic thoughts of how we operate as OneBillion. And I hope when you see a short presentation later, you'll see how that is turned into action.
Thank you, Andrew. That's really, really insightful to hear. And I think one of the points that resonated particularly with me was the respect for the child's screen time and enhancing their holistic experience. And I think one thing that you'll see throughout this webinar is how OneBillion have adapted their software from being focused on purely literacy and numeracy to broaden their software to engage children more holistically. So thank you, Andrew, for that. That was really insightful. We're now going to move on to Nat, and I'd like you, Nat, if you could, to explain to me why you've taken this new design approach, how it differs from your previous work, and what you're aiming to achieve with it.
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, I'd say there's a couple of key ways that we've changed as an organization through this process. And the main shift, really, which Andrew's alluded to, is that we now always center the needs of neurodivergent children throughout our entire design process. So effectively, we're designing through the lens of neurodiversity. And this isn't designing to a label or a diagnosis, it is really designing for the needs themselves. And what we've discovered is that this results in an experience which is better for every child. So later when Sam presents, later in the webinar, I know she's going to share some really great examples of what this means in practice. So designing with a neurodivergent child in mind and this being better for every child. But I'd say also it's actually gone beyond the content development into pretty much everything that we do at OneBillion, including, for example, our recruitment process. So just a really quick example is we learned through the sort of the trainings and the upskillings that we've had around neurodiversity about the need for more certainty and providing a bit more structure. And so just as a quick example, in our recruitment process, we provide examples of we provide a subsection of questions that candidates know they'll be asked so that we can sort of create a more sort of structured and calming experience. But I'd say the other sort of really significant change, moving back onto the content, is how we strategically engage experts, whether that's in neurodiversity or SEND or play-based education or maybe some other area. So at OneBillion, all of our content design and development happens in-house with our own team of highly experienced expert colleagues. But we've now woven into our design process these touch points with trusted external experts who speak on behalf of the child. So Aida is one such. We've been extremely fortunate in the past to sort of regularly consult with Aida, particularly around the needs of children with ADHD. And this really enables us to sort of sense check our intuitions, or learn about an area that we don't perhaps have the expertise in. And we've combined that with more targeted SEND trainings for our team. So I think what we all feel is that this has helped all of us to really build up a better understanding of what we need to do and why, so that we can respond more intuitively to different children's needs on different days.
So that's really interesting that. So it's not just purely changes in the content and the software, but it's actually an organizational change as well. You've had a shift at an organizational level to think in a broader, sort of more inclusive way than perhaps you were previously. Interesting. So I have another question for you. What led you to commission the research? And what specific questions were you hoping it would answer? So why did you go down the research route with this particular project funded by Lego?
Yes. So yeah, as you say, we started this work under a grant from the Lego Foundation, which we're still in the process of. We're about halfway through. And as the grant is largely focused on content development, not exclusively, but largely through a lens of neurodiversity and play, we really wanted to ensure that we were on track with delivering better impact for neurodivergent children and all children, so that we could kind of course correct if needed. So what was important here was to commission research that wasn't exclusively looking at learning outcomes. We really wanted to understand whether children were having a joyful, meaningful experience, whether we were delivering a holistic experience that they found calming and playful. And so the video observation research, which I think Aida is going to touch on in a moment, was really informative because that was looking at engagement and interaction and children's stress levels and these areas which are sometimes, I guess, a bit harder to gauge. And I think it's important to say as well that at OneBillion we really believe in research that has or can have a very tangible impact on what we then deliver to children. So it's been a very interesting experience to design and commission research that has that as an absolute starting point. The Amazing Moments research, which again I think we touch on later, was a really good example because it completely aligns with our human-centered design. So this was research which consulted with teachers and practitioners, largely from the Global South, who work with children every day and they see their progress and they understand their barriers. And they wanted to share that sort of magical moment of when, for example, a child makes a breakthrough or suddenly gets something that they've been struggling with. And for us, this is an amazing opportunity to listen very carefully to again, these experts who every day are working with children, really know them. And then we see it as our job to then consider how we can translate those learnings into something really meaningful in the software.
That's great, Nat. Thanks for that. And I think for the researchers online, I think there's a real message there that research doesn't always have to be focused on learning outcomes and measuring change in learning outcomes over time. I think there's a lot of research to do with product development and implementation that isn't necessarily captured in the more traditional research methodologies looking at efficacy, for example, of impact. So that leads us on really nicely now, Nat, to Aida Layachi, who has been conducting some research with OneBillion, myself and Natalia, over the past couple of years. And Aida, I wondered if you could briefly summarize the key findings from the Lego project research that we've conducted, including the expert evaluation, the observation study in Malawi, and the Amazing Moments study. So Natalia is going to show your slides, and if you can take us through that research, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nikki. So as you mentioned, I had the honor of working initially with OneBillion and you, Professor Nikki Pitchford, and later at the center on a number of research projects exploring the use of EdTech to enhance the quality of education for neurodiverse learners. And as we all know, one of the fundamental components of the United Nations Sustainable Development 2030 agenda is quality education. It aims to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all. And EdTech has emerged as an essential tool to achieve this goal. So we are no longer confined to the traditional classroom and the traditional strategies and pedagogies. Technology is opening new doors to new opportunities, breaking down barriers, and reshaping what education can look like. And what makes EdTech especially powerful is its potential to meet the diverse learners of students. So every learner is unique. We are all different. We have different strengths, different needs, different challenges, and different ways of engaging with knowledge. And with the right tools, technology can personalize learning, provide targeted support, and so on and so forth, where all students could have the opportunity to thrive. Having said that, if not tailored to the individual needs of neurodiverse learners, EdTech or integrating EdTech can create new layers of exclusion at school. And given this, OneBillion channeled their energy into investigating the suitability of their EdTech tool for children with diverse needs, and research findings has been translated in different attempts to review their resources and software. And therefore, basically, OneBillion EdTech tool is evidence-informed and is based on research evidence. And today I'm going to focus on evidence from 3 main studies. And next slide, please. So the first study is a technical review that was conducted with SEND experts to investigate their perspectives on the suitability of EdTech tool. That is to say, here we are talking about one tab and one course for children with special educational needs and disabilities. The second study was an observational study, here focusing on the interaction of children with special educational needs and disabilities in Malawi. And the third study to focus on amazing learning moments, and here focused on learning from the experiences or learning from the stories of teachers. And next slide, please. So the first study, which was published in 2024, aimed to investigate the utility of EdTech for children with SEND, identify possible adaptations that could be made to one tab hardware and one core software. And the main objective really was to reduce barriers to learning by reviewing and improving one tab and one course technology to respond to the individual needs of children with special educational needs and disabilities. And to do this, can I have next slide, please? We adopted a participatory expert semi-structured formative evaluation where 10 experts, SEND experts were recruited from UK and Nordic universities. The experts were experts in different SEND categories, such as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, language disorders, sensory motor difficulties, moderate and severe learning difficulties, deaf education, vision impairment, Williams syndrome, Down syndrome, but also we had experts from early years education and from applied educational and child psychology, and they provided great insights and great perspective on how EdTech tool could be used for diverse learners. And so basically participants were asked to engage with the technology individually in their own time and then complete a written technical review form. The technical review form included 3 main sections, so focused mainly on what works, basically what they liked about OneTab and one course, what hinders, basically the barriers or the challenges that they see in the technology, and recommendations, that is to say their suggestions and recommendations on how to improve and adapt the technology. So, and then analyze it using reflexive thematic analysis. The findings showed some very, let's say, interesting insights on the strengths, but also on area for development for one course and OneTab. And the next slide, please. And so this thematic map provides the main themes that were discussed by our experts. So first of all, we had the strengths of OneTab and one course, and our participants found OneTab and one course fun, easy to access, visually accessible, has great sound quality. They found one course to be attractive, engaging, joyful, accessible for children, but also they stressed the fact that it was designed to address technological issues that can be especially challenging in lower middle income countries, such as internet connectivity, electricity, and so on and so forth. In addition, they focused on the fact that it offers good support for learners, and it provides good resources and good content that was accessible for learners in different settings. They also had recommendations regarding hardware updates, so updates within OneTab and additional assistive devices. So basically, they suggested including, for instance, enlarging the font size, external volume buttons, ensuring easy volume control by children, but also highlighted that some additional assistive devices could be used to promote interaction by children with special educational needs and disabilities, such as the use of projectors, the use of AAC, so augmented and alternative communication tools and devices. So sometimes it's really useful to integrate different assistive devices and assistive technologies with softwares and EdTech tools to make sure it is easily accessible by children with special educational needs and disabilities. They also had suggestions regarding software updates, such as enhancing the visual support, using more instructional and language content, enhancing progress layout, and supporting learners' agency. And I remember very well that we had a good discussion in a webinar after collecting the data from the participants. We had a webinar with the experts where they all discussed their points of view, and we had a good discussion on how to support learners' agency and what kind of agency could we give learners at that age. Could we just give them the choice to select what they want, or do we need to be structured on what to give them? And so we had some really useful insights from them. We had also a theme regarding supporting children with vision impairment, hearing, and functional difficulties, where our experts provided some good recommendation regarding how to support children with vision impairment, as they identified some technological features, tasks, and content that may present some barriers to children with vision impairment in particular. Boosting motivation was one of the themes that were discussed. And so participants suggested that feedback used in one course could be developed by embedding differentiated and explanatory feedback. So sometimes the different types of feedback provided could be really useful for children with different needs. Also, participants saw the role of educational technology as supporting teacher-student interaction, and therefore they provided several suggestions about how one tab and one course could be adapted to facilitate the role of the teacher in children's learning. So how it could be used to support teachers and to allow them to support their learners. And so this was our first study. And after collecting the data regarding recommendation of the SEND experts, we have conducted an observational study, which I will discuss in the second slide, please. So the observational study focused on the interactions of neurodivergent children with an interactive educational technology deployed in Malawi to promote foundational skills. So it aimed to examine the interaction of neurodivergent children with one course and also to explore the extent to which neurodiversity impacts children's interaction with the technology. Next slide, please. In order to do this, we adopted an exploratory descriptive research approach where 11 neurodivergent children attending a resource center in Malawi were recruited. The children were aged between 5 and 17 years old. We had children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism spectrum disorder, learning difficulties, and some of them were just unclassified. So they had some difficulties, but they were not formally diagnosed. And so we have used different tools. Next slide, please. So for the child functioning, we have used the child functioning module, which was a parent's questionnaire. We also, in order to explore the child behavior, we have used the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, which was another parent's questionnaire. And in order to focus on child's interaction, we used two tools. So the first one was the engagement with and attitudes towards learning questionnaire, which was the teacher's questionnaire. And also we have collected data using video recordings of children interacting with one course. So we have used observers' ratings in order to measure children's interactions with one course. So analyzed using different quantitative methods of analysis, the findings, next slide, please. The findings showed that or captured mild to moderate difficulties for the different behaviors and functioning assessed on the group level. So on the group level, there were different mild to moderate difficulties. But the co-occurrence of difficulties was captured, which increased the complexity of problems experienced by neurodivergent children. The results also indicated that children could interact with one course technology. However, we have captured two main interesting points. So the first one was that a high level of emotional problems was associated with high attention to task. So those who were really attentive to task, some of them had a high level of emotional problems. And also there was a positive correlation found between hyperactivity and teacher support, demonstrating that children with high levels of hyperactivity required extra support from their teachers to complete the in-app tasks. So this was the second study, which focused on observing children using one course and one tab. And we found that children were able basically to use one course, but also the findings highlighted correlations between emotional problems, for instance, and attention to task, correlation between teacher support and hyperactivity. And these kind of associations are really important for us to understand how children interact with the software and what can we do with our tools, with the technology, in order to support children and to make it easy for them to access the tools. And the next slide, please. So the third study was the Amazing Learning Moments study. So we call it Amazing Learning Moments because it aims to shed light on teachers' experiences and capture what educators of young children do to spark learning. So what they do to spark these amazing learning moments. We aimed to learn from teachers about amazing learning moments they lived with their students. Next slide, please. So we adopted a storytelling protocol. It was a 6-step procedure in order to capture this episodic narrative. And we distributed the survey using, first of all, our networks, but then using different teachers' WhatsApp groups and forums. And next slide, please. And so we had participants from different countries such as Norway, Malawi, Nigeria, Singapore, Kenya, Tanzania, and Ghana. Next slide, please. And so our findings showed that most teachers captured amazing learning moments when using playful learning with their students, when using challenge-based learning, when using student-directed learning, when using learning by doing, when using digital tools and interactive learning, when using different strategies to promote personalized learning and collaboration in learning. And interestingly, most teachers refer to different culturally responsive pedagogies, showing that in our tools, we need to reflect the culture, we need to reflect, realities, local realities that children can, can find really interesting because it reflects their society, it reflects their realities. Next slide, please. And so basically our 3 studies suggest, first of all, the need for promoting technology-enhanced personalized learning into the education of neurodivergent children. Suggests the use of one-course technology with neurodivergent children might mitigate some of the educational barriers and improve learning experience and raise outcomes. It also suggests that one course might also address the lack of qualified personnel to support neurodivergent children in Malawi and other low and middle income countries. So minimize the need for the teacher and provide teacher resources. And this is one of the main barrier or main challenges in low and middle income countries. So basically the lack of qualified personnel. And so the use of one course, or the way one course is designed, is to support students, to support children, even in the absence of teachers. So here the goal is not to replace teacher, but basically in some situations, the children, they find themselves in a situation where they have to do the efforts themselves to learn, even outside of the school, outside of their classrooms. And sometimes they can't just find the support they need. And therefore, one course can minimize the need for a teacher here and support the students' sense of agency and autonomous learning to learn by themselves. Thank you.
That's great, Aida. It was really interesting to hear all that research put together in one presentation, and the amount of new knowledge gained from that research. So yeah, really interesting, Aida. Thank you for that. And I think it does address that, somewhat thorny issue of, lack of resources and very few SEND teachers in a lot of the countries that we're operating in. And demonstrates how, if you've got an EdTech that can support teachers in their ability to address the complex needs of a lot of learners, even learners with mild difficulties, mild to moderate difficulties. Our research showed that there was co-occurrence and complexity, and that can be very daunting to teachers, especially in large classes, to try and accommodate their practice to support all learners. So that's great, Ida. Thank you for that. And we're now going to move on to Sam Weeks, who's an amazing content author at OneBillion. And Sam, I wondered if you could show us how you have adapted your software in response to the insights from the research.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. I think Nat has some slides. Yep, thanks, Nat. So I'd just like to start by saying that from a content development perspective, it's so valuable to have these research-based inputs because they really change what we do for children in our software. And I'm going to take you through some examples of how we've adapted the software in response to insights from the research. So I'm going to start with our digital teacher, Anna. On this slide, you can see the latest version of Anna, and she's been redesigned based on insights from the research. We learned that our previous version of Anna, which I'll show you in a moment, might be confusing for autistic children because she was quite cartoon-like and there was a lack of correlation between her mouth movements and her speech. And we also learned that it's important for neurodivergent children to feel like their teacher is invested in them, even if it's a digital teacher. Next slide, please. So here on the slide, you can see the previous version of Anna, and she's quite cartoon-like, and she had a very limited number of simple mouth movements. And you can also now see the new version on the right side, and she's much more realistic. She has highly accurate mouth movements, and these sync to her speech. We've made Anna's eyes larger, and we've tried to make her look friendlier. And we're also making some changes to how she interacts with children. And we're making her more playful. We're identifying opportunities to integrate more feedback and encouragement, as well as explanations if the child gets something wrong, and celebrations when the child does well. And most of these changes came out of insights we got from the technical review. And next slide, please. So I'm going to show you a quick example of Anna in action. Just to mention, this is from the English version of our software, but children would get this in their own language. Can you play the video, Nat?
Great picture.
Thanks. So next, another thing we've been learned a lot about from the research is related to anxiety around learning. And we've learned that neurodivergent children come to learning or can come to learning with a lot of anxiety due to negative experiences that they've had. Some things that might cause anxiety for children include an initial activity that's too stressful or challenging. And this may cause a child just to shut down immediately because they feel like they're going to fail. Also, not knowing how long an activity is and the uncertainty that comes with that, and fear of making an error. And I think this was, Ada touched on this in terms of sometimes you see a high level of engagement and attention to an activity, but that might be because the child's so worried they're going to get something wrong. Next slide. So when thinking about how we can reduce anxiety, we've learned that it's important for children to have a positive first interaction with the software. And normally a one-course session starts with a diagnostic activity to identify suitable content for the child. But we've learned that this may be stressful for some children. So we've been thinking about how we can start sessions with activities that feel both fun and achievable before we ask the child to do something more challenging. And you can see an example of something we've been working on, playing on the slide. So this is a mindful colouring activity, and the child can create patterns by colouring the shapes, and they can cycle through different colour options. You can also see that we've added a little timer icon in the corner of the screen, and this is to give the child a sense of how long the activity is and hopefully a sense of certainty that comes with that. And then Anna also appears 10 seconds before the end of the activity to let the child know that the activity is about to end so that they can prepare themselves to switch tasks, which is something else we've learned is really important for neurodivergent children. Next slide. We've also been thinking about how we can help children regulate their emotions and feel grounded in their bodies. We're working on developing some breathing and calming activities for the software. And the example on this slide is an activity that we've started using at the start of a session to help the child get ready for learning. And play the video.
Let's start. Take 2 big breaths with me. In. Out. In. Out.
Thanks. We always find that really calming to watch that video as well and breathe along with Anna. Another area that came up in the research is around awards, or more specifically, what we've started calling micro rewards. So we know that rewards are important for all children, and we've always had rewards in the software that children receive at the end of activities in recognition for their efforts. But from the research, we've learned that children, particularly children with ADHD, generally have lower intrinsic motivation. So micro rewards that they get during activities can be beneficial for maintaining motivation. So based on this, we started to integrate little eggs into activities that children collect as they complete activities. And you can see this on the first screenshot on the slide. At the end of an activity, all of the eggs the child has collected, will be collected into a box, which you can see on the second screenshot. And then at the end of a session, the child gets to see how many eggs they collected in total and celebrate their hard work. So you can see on the third screenshot what happens, and basically the eggs will fly out of the box and they land on the grass, and then the child can touch any egg and they'll all start hatching. This example shows dinosaurs hatching, but we also have chicks, turtles, lizards, aliens, and robots. So it's always a surprise. In addition to these micro rewards, we've also learned that children with ADHD are motivated by kind of social rewards. This might be a smiling teacher, a verbal reward, or a fun sound effect for a correct answer. So this has also been informing how we design activities and interactions with Anna. And just to mention, with all of these examples I'm showing you, these have been developed with ongoing support from experts in neurodiversity, which I think Nat spoke to also. So when we were developing these micro rewards, we worked really closely with Aida because she has a lot of expertise with ADHD. Next slide. We also learned a lot about visual design, and we learned that some children with ADHD can get overwhelmed if there's too much happening on the screen or if colors are too bright. Some autistic children may find it easier to recognize photos rather than illustrations as they're less abstract. And they may also experience challenges with generalization. And by this, we mean if you showed a car and taught the word car, an autistic child might only associate the word car with that specific car and be unable to generalize to other cars. Next slide. So here you can see some before and after screens that have been changed because of the research. On the before version, we have quite a few cards on the screen. They have big, busy background designs, and they also had a turnover animation. On the after version, we've pared this right back and made the screen much calmer and simpler. Next slide. Here you can see our library, which contains around 260 books plus encyclopedia articles. And we've redesigned the library interface following similar principles to the other screens that I showed you. Next slide. In terms of photographic imagery, we use a lot of photographs in our library content, but we generally use illustrations in the activities. However, as a result of the research, we have started using more photos in activities. On the screen is an example of a vocabulary activity that's designed to support generalization. In the activity, the child will see 3 different photos that represent the target word, in this case, house. And this is to support generalization. And they will also see the illustration that we use to represent the word house in one course to help make that connection. Next slide. Finally, from the research and our work with the Lego Foundation, we have been thinking about how to make sure neurodivergent children's voices are centered and represented in the software, and that neurodivergent children see themselves and their experiences represented in our content. So in our library, we have a growing collection of content that's either been developed through co-creation with neurodivergent children, both in Malawi and the UK, and through collaboration with neurodivergent authors. We also have an increasing number of books that feature neurodivergent characters. And the screenshots in the middle of the slide are from a comic series called Tammy and Delaney that feature an autistic girl and a neurotypical boy. Tammy's autism is explored through her friendship with Delaney and their different experiences of the world. Originally, the autistic character was actually a boy, but we learned that there tends to be less awareness and representation of autistic girls, so we switched this. And through the research, we've also learned for children who experience challenges with reading, comic book formats offer a more accessible and less intimidating route into reading. So this is something we've been adding to our library. Next slide. So on this final slide, you can see a few more examples of books developed through co-creation and a few more of the comics that we've been developing for the library. And I'll conclude my answer by saying I hope these examples show how much we value research and how important and impactful it is for our ongoing work to create quality learning experiences for every child.
That's fantastic, Sam. Absolutely incredible to see how you have embedded that research to create truly beautiful content. I think you can see from the claps coming up that your efforts and achievements have been hugely appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for speaking today. We have 10 minutes to open the floor to the audience for questions. If anybody would like to come online and ask a question, or you can post it in chat and I can read it out. Any questions from the audience you'd like to hear from OneBillion and from Aida? Sam, can you say more about the challenges that you've had?
Sure. Can just what kind of challenges in content design or? Sure. Let me try and think of an example. Oh gosh, I'm sure I'm sure there are many. Sorry, Nat, I don't know if any come to mind off the top of your head. I suppose one of maybe not a challenge, but that it's a process, and often we come up with things that we think are going to work or we think are good ideas, and then either when we get inputs from experts or when we do a lot of user testing with children, we'll see that, oh, actually what we were thinking would work or was going to be effective is not quite right, or maybe is not right at all, and we have to throw it away and kind of restart. So I think we always have to be very willing not to be too precious about ideas. And also, I think it's hard sometimes trying to trying to find like an end of the process. So if I take Anna as an example, I could show you a whole series of Anna designs, and we went through multiple iterations and trying to decide we want high quality, we aim for perfection, but at some point it has to go into the software. So I think trying to see where we want to keep pushing and where we decide, okay, we've reached the point where it's good enough. And I think one more thing maybe to pick up on is from the first research, obviously we talk more broadly about children with SEND, and I focused on neurodivergent children, but we have big ambitions for all children, including blind children and deaf children. So that's another big challenge for us, and thinking about how we can truly make everything, the software, accessible for every child. But we have some exciting things coming up there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about those children with really profound sensory impairments, given that the software is multisensory, how you design software to address those. But maybe that's the focus of another webinar later. There's a question about the storytelling protocol, why it was chosen and how it was used and analysed. Aida, would you like to take that one?
Sure, thanks, Nikki. Yeah, thanks for the question. So the protocol actually based on Mueller's 2019 six-step protocol for episodic narratives. And so basically it has six main steps. So selecting a phenomenon of interest, describe interview process, definition of phenomena, request, that is to say story, request a story about the phenomenon, and additions or amendments. So basically it was selected because it gives a structure or a flow to the narration of the story. And basically what we have done is that we have adopted that protocol and we have defined. So for instance, we started with the step one, define your amazing learning moment, then summarize your story, then ask the participants to describe their understanding of the amazing learning moment, ask them to provide information about the context. So basically the protocol provided the different steps or structure to allow our participants to narrate their story, because sometimes it's really difficult to just go ahead and ask the participant, tell me about or give me an amazing learning moment, for instance. They will find it really difficult to provide all the needed, let's say, details. However, with this protocol, it allowed us to ask about different details that we needed in order to know more about their story. And that's why it was selected. For the analysis, we analyzed it using reflexive thematic analysis, Brown and Clark's reflexive thematic analysis. So we tried to read first. We had first a quality QA, that is to say, different researchers checked the quality of the stories, made sure that it included all the details needed, and then we've used a qualitative reflexive thematic analysis to analyze it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aida. A quick question to Andrew. How old is OneBillion?
Well, OneBillion was actually started 11 years ago, but we've worked in Malawi for a lot longer. We started in 2003, so this was before tablets existed, and our very first EdTech there was using interactive DVD and then interactive MP4 players, very basic tablets. We're particularly pleased because although we're in quite a few languages now, we started our work in Chichewa and then had it translated into English. So we worked with the Malawi Ministry of Education and their Institute of Education and their university. So we're trying to do things the other way round to how often things happen. We see the marginalized child first, and then although we have made our material in English, that that came second. And that's the approach we take today. I think, just if I can also add to what Sam said, answering her question, there are many challenges, but this challenge of, well, not enough time, but also being prepared to have your certainties confounded. We sometimes make things, and then as we unpick it and go into real detail, we have to, as Sam said, throw some things away. And I think that's a very important part of creating EdTech.
That's a great point, Andrew. Thank you for making that. There's just one more question just before we wrap up about the content design. So, Sam, do you have any recommendations for future content design?
Sure. So within our own software, I can talk to some of our thoughts. So I think probably the first thing to recognize is this research has been so rich. I think I could spend the next 10 years integrating things. We've just learned so much. So we definitely, I think, as I think Andrew mentioned, we haven't plateaued. We have so much more to do. So I think really specific things in the near future that we're focusing on. Anna is a really big part of our plans, and how Anna interacts with the child and guides them through the software. And I think Aida also touched on something quite important that we've been thinking about, which is agency. So how can we give children choice within a kind of structure? And how can Anna make that choice meaningful for her? So we're really interested, particularly in our library, with using Anna as kind of a librarian to help children move through the library, help them choose which books they want to read, and finding ways that Anna can kind of model reading strategies and almost scaffold the reading experience. And I think something we think about a lot, and again, this is for every child, not just neurodivergent children, but how can we deliver that experience of an adult reading a book to you, of the joy of hearing a story? So that's a really big area for us as a specific example. I'm trying to think if there's any other things in the near. I think agency beyond that as well, and giving children, we're working on some new session design formats, and children will have much more, they will be able to choose their activities during those sessions. And we're really interested to see how that impacts learning and impacts children's experience in the software. And then I think one final point to touch on is, as mentioned, we're expanding beyond foundational literacy and numeracy, and really thinking about the child's kind of holistic learning experience, social emotional skills, executive function skills, and just their overall well-being and development at this really critical age and stage in their education. So we also have a lot of work looking at social emotional learning and supporting a more holistic experience for the child.
That's great, Sam. And we've just got one quick question, which is going to take a webinar in itself to answer. But we've got 2 minutes left, and I need a minute to wrap up. So, Andrew or Nat, can you step in on this question? So it's from one of your judges from the Global Learning X Prize, who's asking, could you say a little bit more about relationships in Malawi and elsewhere that have sustained the effort in low income, high need settings, and what are the funding models? Can you very briefly sum that up? Andrew, take the floor.
David, could I say, well, thank you so much. I mean, X Prize was an amazing encouragement to us. We believe at OneBillion that it has to be the country, the government's project, not our project. And we're delighted that in Malawi it's become a Ministry of Education project with the government's goal to go to every primary school. Our expertise is focusing on the software, which is completely has the child at the center. But of course, there are lots of other things that have to go in parallel: the funding, the raising, either through the government or initially through philanthropic funding. But we have to have something that brings value for money as well. It's no good making something that can deliver for a child if it's too expensive to scale. So there's a lot of work that goes on in making sure that the child gets the appropriate amount of screen time. The hardware is sustainable. It's as high quality as possible. It lasts for, it can work for multiple children in a day and over a long period of time. None of this is easy, but getting things that really deliver requires the expertise of a lot of people and the research. And Ida also talked about the hardware as well. Very important. Sorry, I know you need 1 minute, so over to you. Sorry, I was a bit too long. Over to you, Nicky.
Thanks very much, Andrew. That's fantastic. Thank you to all our speakers today. Thank you to everybody in the audience for attending this webinar, which is the first in a series of webinars on EdTech leadership. Our next webinar will be on the 14th of October and will be co-hosted with an amazing organization working in Latin America, and that's CoSchool, and they focus on promoting social and emotional learning. So we'll be hearing from what inspires CoSchool, their hybrid approach to supporting social emotional learning, and we'll also be hearing from one of our researchers looking at how the CoSchool approach operates over multiple levels of the education ecosystem. So if you have time and are available, it would be wonderful to join us, for you to join us on the 14th of October, and we will be sharing more information about that shortly. So watch out for LinkedIn posts. Thanks so much, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed it today. And if you have any more questions or points you'd like to raise, please ping me an email and we can keep this conversation going. Thank you so much. Goodbye.